As I was saying, tonight we're going to talk about how to grow food longer and potentially better. We have many, many topics. For example, next month, we're going to talk about attracting beneficial insects, and it's not just bees, it's not just pollinators. I'm mainly looking at predatory insects, which are really powerful. And we have later a field trip, a virtual field trip into your soil to talk about the ecosystem that's in the soil. But tonight we're talking about season extension and a little bit and succession planting to get more food out of your garden at any given time and also throughout the season. But before that, I'm going to do a few announcements and a little bit. If you have brief descriptions of your favorite seeds for growing in this area, like if you have a favorite tomato or a favorite kind of spinach that you grow, it would be great to know that. And you can also put the names of them in the chat as you talk about them. So of course, I have a lot of information to go through as well, but I definitely would love to hear about your favorite varieties. And so here are a few announcements. Here's one is this is from Shelley at Bayhay. Tammy Meter photographed this and she provides it to us. So if you have garlic out now that you planted last fall, you can side dress it. Shelley does it twice. I just do it once. I just do it like when the crocuses come out, I just side dress it with AP fertilizer. And if I feel my AP fertilizer or my bed is slightly lacking in nitrogen because, you know, it hasn't been amended in a while, then I might put some extra something with a little more extra nitrogen. So she uses blood meal because she's okay with that. There are also fish sources and alfalfa sources and things like that that you can use. The next announcement is that there is a big Tilth Alliance edible plant sale on the 16th, all morning and into the afternoon at Rainier Beach Urban Farm and Wetlands. Tilth is a really interesting organization, and the urban farm is very interesting as well because the people decide what they grow, and they're very responsive to what people want them to grow. For example, they have a culturally relevant food program. And so you might find plants that are very successful in this area, and you might find plants that you didn't know about before. And the link for that, the information for that is in the resource page, which the link for which is in the chat. What else do I have? The city wants you to know that you might get a green waste pail because they're very interested in learning about what makes it easier for us to compost things. And they would like you to, if you want one, to apply to get it, fill out a little form, and then they will have you use it for a number of weeks, and then they'll ask you some questions. And you can ask them what the questions will be. My colleagues and I speculate that they just want to know how to make it more effective or better for you to recycle your green waste. And those are just collection buckets, and then you put them into the green waste, the city green waste. Now, would anybody like to share some varieties? I have a few varieties, but I know John McInnes does too. Who would like to share a variety that you particularly like? Oh, can I email the green waste? Phil, is it possible for you to go to the resource page link and then the green waste link will be on there? If it's not, I certainly can do that. Email the link for the green waste. Okay. Okay, thanks, Phil. Kelly likes Napa carrots. That's a recommendation. And Emily Mansfield says, I got all my seeds from Territorial and I have for decades. So yeah, Territorial breeds seeds for our area. On the resource page, I also have a table at the bottom of the resource page that is other breeders for this area, because there are lots of plant breeders specifically breeding for this area or trialing seeds that are they're really dedicated to being adapted to this area, to having seed adapted to the Northwest. John McInnes, do you want to give us a tiny bit about your tomatoes? I'm going to try to scroll down until I find your actual picture of tomatoes. There we
Yeah,
go. I'm going to let anybody who wants your PDF email me, and then I'll give them the copy. Does that work?
that would work. Do you have, can you bring the PDF up on the screen?
Yep, I do, but I might not have it
I
on the right.
I was able to find it here as I scramble for it.
Okay,
If I can just go down the list.
yeah.
The first the first variety that, first of all, tomatoes, if everybody hasn't grown a lot of tomatoes, there's a couple different varieties, basically, or a couple different types of tomatoes. One is an indeterminate and one is a determinate. A determinate is a determinate amount of size, basically. It's a bush tomato. An indeterminate will grow until frost kills it. It will just keep on growing. They're very, very large. I tend to favor the determinate just because I grow quite a, in this, we have a relatively short growing season, so I tend to grow them in containers to a large extent. I kind of split about half containers and half in the garden. And on a container side, I grow in 15-gallon black containers so I get the heat to the roots from the sun. But there's a Burbank type that I grow, and it's very reliable, and I grow them every year. They're about a 3 to 4 inch fruit, about a 2 foot plant, pretty disease resistant. There's a silvery fir tree, which is a 2 to 3 inch fruit, about 3 feet tall. Gets a little bit of mildew, but all of my determinate types, I tend to beat the mildew. So by the time mildew shows up, and it always shows up, the plants have already fruited and for the most part are already processed and in the freezer or canned or whatever. There's a Beaver Lodge slicing, which is a little bit smaller, about a 2 inch. There's a Beaver Lodge slicing and a Beaver Lodge plum. I've grown both. Both are great. They're about 3 foot tall, 55-day to fruitation. Very flavorful, extremely flavorful. Very, very good slicer for salads, etc. There's a home slice, which is a nice little, very rounded shape, very disease resistant, nice little tomato. And then there's a glacier of the last of my determinants. That's a 2 inch fruit, a little smaller, a little earlier. That if you haven't grown very many tomatoes, everybody's probably successfully, if they've tried any tomatoes, been able to grow a cherry tomato. They're a small tomato. They don't take a lot of heat because they're small. If you go back to a beefsteak tomato, they take a lot of heat. They're a very big tomato, and you can almost draw a proportional line between the two, or a straight line between the two, and pick your season time for the size of the tomato. I don't try to grow the big ones. There's not enough season here. So I tend to grow the smaller ones. I don't tend to grow the cherry tomatoes because they're just a lot of work or a lot of picking time. So I tend to grow the ones that are lemon size, plum size, orange size, that type of thing. So which were nice when you're canning. They fit in the canning jar type of
Mm-mm.
thing.
You're
Skipping
not
over to,
wrangling a huge thing.
yeah, you're not cutting them up to get them in the canning jar. If you're processed, I do basically three types. I can the old-fashioned way, water bath canning, whole tomatoes. I reduce down, process down, and freeze tomatoes that's processed, and all the liquid basically is boiled off. And then I also season Italian type for spaghetti, Italian dishes type of things. So I kind of do three types every year. So, but on the canning side, which I used yesterday, the last two of my canned quart tomatoes. So all I have left right now is the frozen stuff. Skipping over to the indeterminate, again, these are the ones that grow and grow and grow. So you need to have root space and you need to have climbing space for them. A determinate tomato will grow on the ground if you don't have anything else for it. There's a Goliath Early, which I'm a big fan of. They're about a 3 to 4 inch fruit. There is a Cosmonaut Volkov, which is one of the largest tomatoes I grow, 3 to 4 inch fruit. Very flavorful. I've picked up my first one of those at Bainbridge Gardens. I'd never heard of it before. There is a Bloody Butcher, strange name, but a Bloody Butcher is a small little 1 inch fruit, very flavorful. I tend not to grow it because it gets into that almost cherry tomato size. It's just a lot of hand holding. The next one is the one I'm crossing off my list. It's a Muscovich, and it has a tendency to rot on the vine. And if I don't get to they're very good tomatoes. It's just there's not a lot of stem life to them. There's a Bonnie Original, which I don't grow much. They're Home Depot type plants, but they're pretty good. There's Early Girls. If you wanted a larger tomatoes, it's pretty reliable. That's not a bad tomato. I don't grow a lot of it. There's a Persimmons Yellow, and I always have troubles with the name of this, is an Azoycha, Azoycha. It's a Russian name. A lot of the tomatoes that I grow, almost all the tomatoes I grow, are Russian or Canadian, northern climates. So that's kind of the key to my growing of tomatoes is northern climates, relatively small. Try to get them before mildew takes them over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tell us about that. I really appreciate it. And you can email me if you'd like his full list, and he has like lots of details about each one in there, which is lovely. Thank you so much, John.
Sure.
Heidi, remember you telling me years ago that you loved Happy Ridge broccoli. That's awesome. Thank you.
It's still my favorite.
That's great. Yeah, we were talking about why is it so flavorful? It's amazing.
Well, it's a cross with the Chinese variety with the
so
Galan.
The whole thing is yummy, right?
Yeah.
Really neat. Thank you. And I don't know if everybody's looking at the chat, but I tend to read it out for people who might not be able to see it. Kelly likes West Coast seeds out of Canada. Kelly, I called West Coast like 2 years ago and they said, oh, we can't ship to the US anymore. But I bet it's not that way. I bet that was like some COVID
There's
thing,
only
right?
certain varieties that they can't ship. I think it's like peppers and certain things that, as agriculture things, but I get like all my lettuce from them. And I have like 15 different kinds of lettuce that I grow, and they're awesome.
That's fun. That's really neat. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I wanted Purple Cape broccoli from them and they wouldn't ship it in, but maybe now. I mean, I should just see. Cool. Thank you. Where can you find the resource page? The names are flying fast. Phil, one thing is, John, could you repost the 3 links again? The resource page, the link that is my email, because the resource page link you can just click right from the chat. And if you want John McInnes's tomato list, that's a PDF. And so you would email me, which will also show up in the chat, my email, and I will send it to you. And John, if you want me to cross off Moscovich and the other one, you can maybe remind me of that. Maybe email me, or you can adjust it and send me a new copy.
I can try tomorrow to just redo it and send that over to you. I'll have it to you tomorrow.
Oh, well, thanks. I like this little pumpkin right here, I would say. It is sort of an heirloom from this area, but it's been rebred by somebody named Carol Deppy because she thought that the strains that were on the market were getting away from the original flavor, the super thick flesh, the texture of the flesh, and the incredibly tasty seeds. I can't believe how yummy they are. So she rebred it. So there's a company called Adaptive Seed, and they sell her strain of it. They'll keep for a year. I have some in the garage usually when I'm harvesting this year's, I still have some of last year's. That's not its main feature. It is a big rambler, so you need a place for it to ramble over. So I put it in the corner and let it go. And Carmen peppers are quite successful for me here. It's a sweet pepper, and sometimes they show up in the nurseries and sometimes they do not. What else? Do we have any more? Oh, good, Phil, I'm glad that worked. Do we have any more recommendations? I saw another one on the chat. Early girl tomatoes, that's a way to get those early ones. This one works for me. This is bred by a fellow who he's one of those many gardeners who has a PhD and then says, you know what, I think I want to be a subsistence food grower. And they do it. And they end up breeding plants. And his name's Alan Capuler. And that's on the resource page. These are on the resource page for me. And then this is a up to 2-pound tomato that does actually ripen here. You know, maybe it won't in your conditions, but you can see I got a lot of tomatoes. So those are all around. So now I'm going to start talking about continuing what we were doing last time. Last time we went over how to get your garden going, and we used these 4 tips at the end. Use a local planting calendar, not a national one that talks about what to do in Missouri. But here, there's a link for one on the research page. Definitely give them the space. Don't crowd them. Keep them happy and choose Northwest adapted varieties, which was what we were talking about just now. But tonight we're going to continue with 4 more things, 3 things. We're going to learn to overlap plantings so that you can get more growth time and grow your own starts. Underlights if you want to do it early, or even outdoors. Sometimes it makes sense to do it outdoors, not this time of year, but a little later in the season. And how to grow earlier and make your plants happier and longer for certain plants by using covers, certain kinds of protection. So first we're going to talk about successions. This is not 4 different garden beds. This is one garden bed in 4 seasons. So I don't know if I agree with every detail in the picture, but the idea is that you have some things growing. Maybe you overwintered chard and it's producing that last flush of growth for you before it tries to make seeds. And after it tries to make seeds, it's kind of hard to eat. So what you can do is have some lettuce starts ready and you plant them in amongst the chard as you take the chard out. Typically, we put a little more amendment in the soil, maybe a little more compost, or we put some granular organic fertilizer. Yeah, some people have more elaborate setups than that, but that's for a basic garden is a fine way to do it. So you put that in as you take the chard out, and then you put those starts in. And then those starts mature, and then this person is direct seeding some seeds in between those plants. And so you have many, many seasons of food, and they're overlapping. Now, I know that you know that you can read the back of a seed packet, and it will tell you how close and how deep to put the seeds in. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about direct seeding tonight because there's a lot of information about that out there. I am going to tell you about growing starts in cells to start with, and I'm going to tell you some advantages of that, but I don't demand that you do it. But I think it's nice to have in your quiver so that you can do either one and you know what you're doing. And I do a lot of it because, especially when I was feeding teenagers, and I, at the time, was not buying veg all year, I did what are called tight successions. And that is that things were always, there was never a bed where it looked empty because I had just started seed in it. It was, they always had plants in them, unless I had chosen to fallow a bed for a rest. So here's why we might do this. This is just one little area, little patch we're looking at in your garden. Let's say in this patch we plant arugula right here, beginning of April, and it takes 9 weeks, let's say, made this number up, but the arugula is edible all this time, and then it starts to go to seed and stuff, and you pull it out, and let's say you're going to direct seed. So you pulled the arugula out, and then you put in lettuce seed. And then it takes 3 or 4 weeks for it to get going. It might get going after 2 weeks, and then slugs come and mow it down because it's really tiny, and the slugs, it's so small they can just take it out. That might be a little frustrating. So you might start over, and you put the lettuce seed in, and then it grows, and then you take it out. And by now it's hot enough and warm enough in that soil that you can plant basil, because basil doesn't want to sprout in cool soil. So you put basil in. So that's 3 successions in your garden. But what if instead, when the arugula is this old, you say, you know what, that arugula looks like it's going to bolt, or I know from last year that it only goes so long. I'm going to start some lettuce. I'm going to start that lettuce in little tiny pots called cells. You certainly could start it right in the bed before the arugula comes out. That's an option. So in that case, if you have light and space, and their arugula roots are not spread too tightly through the soil, you could start the lettuce in there. So that's direct seeding right into that bed, even though the arugula is still growing, because we're here in between week 6 and 7. But you might have slugs that are hiding in the arugula that are eating off your greens. Not enough light for that lettuce because that arugula has grown very tight and full. You might not have space, and the roots might be competing. So your lettuce gets not a great start. But if you start them in cells, the lettuce here, by the time the arugula comes out, you've got 3-week-old cells, lettuce starts. They're too big for a slug to eat in one bite. They've got 3 weeks worth of growth on them. So they have actually a head start, and you're going to be able to harvest your lettuce earlier. So it's not going to look like this, but it's going to look like this. So we've started the lettuce in cells, and it's grown. The arugula comes out, the lettuce goes in. It's already 3 weeks old. So it's growing and growing, and you get to know just by being a great gardener over the years when your lettuce is about 3 weeks away from being pulled, right? You decide, you know what, it's already pretty warm out there. I'm going to start some basil. It's not quite warm enough, but in 3 weeks, it'll be warm enough for me to get that basil out there. So you're starting basil in cells, and it's 3 weeks old by the time the lettuce comes out, and you put it in. You have moved all of those timelines a little bit, just scooched them a little bit. The plants are happy. But because you've done that, you have the opportunity to plant an entire crop of greens for winter, like kale and cabbage. And you can grow those in cells for a little bit. And then you will have the opportunity that you didn't even have up here, because by September, when the basil comes out, it's too late to plant for winter, because you really need to plant those things in late summer. Those greens will take you all the way through the winter. So it sounds pretty intense, right? But you don't have to do all 4 of these. I just wanted to give you a kind of dramatic example. You don't have to, always be ready with more things. But I think it's a nice thing to think, I wish I had some room for lettuce. I'm going to plant some. And then in the next 3 weeks, I bet I find some space for it. So it is a nice thing to play with. And it's a great, great skill to learn. So let's talk about, moving on, how you go about planting into starts. These are the advantages of planting into starts. And you do not have to plant starts under lights. If you are planting them in like April and May, you can actually plant your starts outside. So I'm going to talk about you can use lights if you want, especially if you want to grow something that is a warm climate plant, but you want to start it now, then you're going to have it like in your house under lights. But some people say, I have such trouble with such and such, cilantro, lettuce, basil, even though I'm planting them in May and June in my beds, I have a lot of trouble with slugs. And I say, well, you could plant them in cells and get them a little bit bigger and then put them out. And they said, oh, you have to have lights to do that, but you don't. If it's April or May, you've got the sun, so you can grow those. So yeah, depending on the temperature that the plant likes, if it's warm enough outside. So let's take a look. There are 3 ways that I'm going to talk about doing the successions and why you do them. One is single crop successions. This is lettuce. It looks like somebody said, I want to eat lettuce for the next 5 months. So I'm going to plant 5 months worth of lettuce all in one day. But that doesn't work for lettuce because lettuce bolts. So these are bolting and they're trying to grow flowers and then they get not so tasty. So what you do instead is a single crop. It's lettuce of many kinds if you want. And you plant just a little bit at a time. So you say to yourself, in 1 month, I use 8 heads of lettuce. And honestly, I'd add a few to that. I'd say 12, because a couple of them might die. So every month on the 1st of the month, you plant a dozen little cells of lettuce. You can certainly direct seed as well if you want to, but if you have slugs that are mowing them down or you don't have the space, you can use those, use cells. So instead of looking like that, it looks like this. This is quite mature, about to be harvested. This is in the middle, moderate, it's a few weeks away. This one maybe is mostly harvested area. And these are the baby starts. So these are all at different levels of maturity. So that really works well for lettuce. It also works terrifically for cilantro. If you have anything else you like to succession plant like this, please let us know. You know how cilantro bolts all the time? And people say, how do you keep your cilantro from bolting? I give it enough space. I make sure the plants aren't crowded. I keep it happy with water and food. But in addition, I plant, 2 square feet of cilantro. And then even though it's only this big, it's only a month old and it's really tiny, I plant more. And then I do that again and I do it again. And so one has bolted, one I'm eating, and one is growing all the time. Ideally, it's not really always that way. Here's another way to do it. This bed has become, let's say, warm, and lettuce, this person might want to put their lettuce in a little cooler area. So there's lettuce maturing here, but right in the middle, this person says this bed is going to get really, really warm. I already have grown some basil starts, and basil loves the heat. And so they've put these basils in, and these are really big. They've probably been there for a while, but if they have a few leaves on them, they're not going to be eaten by insects quite as much. And there's one more way. And these are fast crops around slow ones. Heidi, maybe you have a desire for what to grow around crops. This is called interplanting. Heidi and I were talking about this the other day. So this is an obvious example. On the left, those are pumpkins, and they are so far away from each other. It's almost hard to plant them that far away from each other. They're planted like this because they are eventually going to need a huge amount of root space. It's not just the vines, because I can, make those go off into the mulch on the side of the garden. It's the root space that these things need. So this is a really big kind of a plant, but look at all the soil that you can use before those plants need that soil, because they're babies and they don't need that soil for many weeks. So on the right-hand side, this is lettuce that's been interplanted. It looks like there's some mustard in there and some kale and a lamb's quarter plant that's a weed, but it's really good for you. So those have been planted in between. And by the time the pumpkins need the space, the greens will have been bearing for you for quite a while. Does anybody have a favorite interplanting? Carrots and radishes, or lettuce and radishes, or onions and radishes are pretty famous because radishes are really fast.
Carrots and tomatoes get along
Oh,
quite.
nice. Tell me about that, would you?
Yeah, I plant my carrots in a couple of different times at the beginning of the year or season, and I put them where the tomatoes are going to be behind them. So by the time the tomatoes are in and growing, they're kind of shading the plants, and then the carrots just keep going. But I think there's also, I read somewhere that the tomatoes help give the carrots better flavor too.
Interesting. Oh, that's cool. So you put the carrots in, you said in front, so that's like on the sunny end.
So my
way?
tomato, I don't use cages. I have just like paddle panel that I put down the center, and then
Yeah,
I
me
put
too. Yeah.
tomatoes on either side, and then towards the edge of the beds are the rows where the tomatoes aren't, but there's just like a
Yeah,
lot of space there. So that's where all the carrots go.
that's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Ooh, come on, move, computer. There you go. Well, if you do want to do some of these starts on your own and dabble in it, you can use cells, which are shown on the side on the left there. Those are, oh, they're not showing up. Well, that's okay. Those are little cells in the left picture. I really like reusing stuff, but I do have caveats about some of these. First of all, egg cartons. I'm not a big fan of egg cartons. I know I have the mic here. You might disagree with me, so feel free. But the roots tend to grow into the paper of the egg carton. So you have to cut the egg carton up and plant it, like a tiny pot. And if you don't have the edge of the carton fully covered a lot by soil, it can wick moisture up and out, and the plant never gets enough moisture. I also, but mostly it's because they tend to dry the starts out. They're a little hard to keep damp, and they're very shallow. And I like a little bit deeper pot than myself. So on the other containers, I would say that you see this one right here. I think those are peppers, or I'm going to say they're peppers. Maybe they're not. Probably they're an ornamental. But anyway, this person is going to have to do what's called pricking out for this one and these and these. It's okay to start them like this, but you have to grab them by their leaves, not their stem, but grab them by their leaves, stick a pencil underneath, and sort of remove them and sort of tease them away from each other, and then plant them into cells like this. Or if they're pretty big, you could plant them in little cups if you had little cups. So they can't stay in there crowded like that. And on this one, this person, I ideally would have had a lot more soil in here so that the plants really are using the depth of that container. That would be really good. These are cut off bottles, as you can see, but you can grow them in all sorts of containers. So these babies, you can grow under lights, but if you have some reason to want to get extra starts going in the spring and summer, you certainly can do that without lights. You can do it outside. I know farmers who do that. You want to check their germination temps, because things like cabbages love 60 to 65 degrees during the day and then 50 to 55 overnight. They like that cool stuff. But if you want to grow spinach, you see this over on the side, this graph right here. Get rid of you guys so I can see the graph myself. This says spinach is pretty good at coming up in low temps. It's really good at coming up in the 50s, but as soon as you hit about 70, it tanks, and you may not get you may not get a very good germination rate. So spinach likes the cool weather, but peppers, they like to germinate at like 85 degrees. So you don't want to put peppers outside, try to do peppers outside in April or May. In fact, peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants are almost always started inside under lamps. So I'll show you a list of what works outside and what doesn't. So do check their germination temps. I just Google it and it comes up. Keep them way off the ground. These are on my deck, so there weren't slugs there. This person has them up on a table. You can use a milk crate. You can use that shelf that sticks out from your barbecue or that broken crab trap or something. You just want the slugs not to be able to live under the starts and then come up and mow every night. And you might want to throw something like some netting over the top, but you don't have to buy something special. If you have, let's see, somebody has a dress-up drawer that they're not using anymore and they have a ripped up wedding veil, you can use that. You can use very, very thin, like toile kind of stuff. Tulle, is that what that's called? Yeah, they also have specialized products to put over them to keep the birds from coming by and snacking on them that you can buy. Does anybody have a good solution for covering up starts so the birds don't eat them? I'm looking at the chat right now. Laura says soil blocks. Nice. So, and Heidi would like some tips about that. Laura, could you, do you want to tell us a little bit about soil blocks? And if not, you could write us a little bit about soil blocks.
Yeah, you bet. I was on some Facebook websites, gardening websites, and last year and stumbled across soil block makers. And they're basically like an old-fashioned ice cube tray that you stuff specially prepared soil into, and then you push it out of this little gizmo, and you get the basis for your basically a unpotted pot of soil. There's no pot. It's just a really damp block of dirt that has a pre-made dibble hole in it for your seeds. And they come in really small to like 2x2 to like 4x4 inch squares. And I think the idea is to start small and then progressively take your small starts. And then as they get bigger, you put them into the next size and then the next size. The idea being that there's no root disturbance and it goes directly into the ground. I got a little Amazon greenhouse and some grow lights, and I just have put on a movie and I sit inside my house with a bucket of basically potting soil. I make trays and trays and trays of little squares, and then I plant what I want to. I seed things and I pop them into my greenhouse, and it's a lot of fun. But it's
Nice.
super successful, and there's no plastic waste. It's just dirt to dirt. It's awesome.
Nice. And when you water them, do you water them from the bottom?
Yes.
Some people use a wicking mat underneath them.
Yeah, I think it depends on how much space you've got in your trays. I have a bunch of like old cafeteria trays, like lunch trays that I got at Goodwill, and they're about half an inch deep. So I water from the bottom, and they're so far so good. Some people get like a green algae on them, but
nothing wrong with that though.
yeah, so far so good. The only problem that I have is that I know that you need some airflow, which I don't have. So I just kind of keep running my hand over the top of the seedlings as they come up. But so far so good. I've got a lot of I've got some sweet peas that are already in the ground, and stuff going on right now that should be ready as soon as this weather settles down a little bit.
Stops freezing.
Yes.
Right. Well, thanks for telling us about that. That's cool.
Thank you.
Let's see what it says next. Okay, window light. Even if it's bright window light, generally it will make very, very leggy starts. If they get super leggy like this, like a thread with leaves, you need to I would say you need to start over. I'm sure somebody could say, no, I saved mine. But a little bit of legginess, I usually rescue by immediately getting them into a really bright light. But even if it looks like bright window light to us, it's not to them. It's not the right wavelengths coming through, and the sun is much more powerful than we assume, I think. So if you are going to grow them inside, then maybe you want to talk about lights, which I'll do in a few minutes. But if you want to do things outside, you need to wait until the weather is appropriate temperature for them, and then you can do those. Also, the soil that you use, I make my own version, but I would say if you're just starting, I'd probably spring for some sterile seed starting mix. I know that sounds bad, like I like very live soil, but I don't want you to get a fungus from your seed starting mix. But there are recipes for seed starting mix online if you would like to use like your home compost and things like that. But you can just get yourself a bag if you're brand new to it. A cloche keeps them warm in chilly weather. I do not mean 30-degree weather, but when it's chilly outside, you can cloche them. And what I mean by a cloche is anything you can turn over upside down on top of them. I really hope that this is a very well used, this is a drawer. It's very well used, and a person didn't take apart a perfectly good plastic drawer system for this. Maybe they ran over the rest of the drawer system and this is all that's left. But I like to grab things from people before they go in their garbage and things like that. If I'm going to cover things up. What I like about this is that it's holding some heat. When it gets into the light, it'll hold even more. Sorry, my computer's oversensitive. It is vented by having some pots under one end, so there's a little bit of airflow. Not so good for our conditions anyway, is that it's on the ground. So that would be a recipe for it getting eaten. But we do need ventilation in these things like cloches. So if you keep your starts in their cells for several weeks, a couple of things. One is that you want to fertilize with 1/4 to half strength liquid fertilizer. One's called Neptune's Harvest. You might jot that down. I don't think I put that in the resources. And if you have lights, you can seed your tomatoes and peppers basically now, if you want to do those. You might need a heat mat. I'm not sure that it's going to allow me to show my heat mat. You can Google plant heat mat. Yeah, there we go. Heat mats look like. Nope. Oh well. Heat mats look like black plastic heating pads is what they look like. And they can warm up the roots under your tomatoes and your peppers.
Carol, I actually use an old heating pad for one of my heating sources. It's I don't know if you've noticed, the newer ones you have now will time out at a certain point. This one is an old style one where when you turn it on, it just stays on low heat for the entire time.
I didn't know they did that. Yeah, I didn't want to mention it, but I have sometimes in like the first class we did, I think I admitted to having used heating pads, which I'm sure is like some kind of fire risk or something, or electrocuting myself or something, but I don't get them wet, right?
Yeah,
That's
everything,
cool.
all my stuff is done in trays, and I usually wrap it in a towel just so it doesn't get too hot.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you want to put a towel between the mat and your plants, or I have an old cake cooling rack, it's really, really short. So I put it under there. Let's see what else we get here. Who goes in cells and who doesn't? Okay, check this out. Just direct seed these, don't do them in cells. So you can see it's a lot of things that make roots. And the reason peas are on there is that peas like to start out growing in a cohort, in a group, because they have relationships with bacteria in the soil, and it helps them to start out in the soil. And they like also to be crowded against their neighbors. Not super crowded, but like an inch apart. They really do well doing that. So don't put those in cells. but these guys are happy in lights in your house now or outside in the springtime. So you see that these are very leafy things. Basil likes to be under lights or after the temps are really high. I do my basil under lights because I don't want to wait until August until my soil is 50 degrees. I want to get it going. I sound very impatient. I'm not that impatient. These need a long, warm time, and we don't have that outside. So we grow these under lights. Tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. Yeah, I already talked about that, but that's why a lot of people just buy starts. They have somebody else do it, and then they go to the nursery and buy them. And these are on the don't lists, but I know lots of people who grow these in cells. The thing about beans and corn is they grow so fast that as soon as you put them in the cells, you'd be ready to put them out within maybe 10 days. It could be longer than that, but you don't want them to get root bound with too many roots in the little cells. And so you really can't put them in and say, maybe I'll get around to preparing their bed later, because you really have to be ready for them. I do beets all the time with no problem. I also direct seed beets, but sometimes I just want to get them started when the beds are too wet to work or something. Cucumbers, the thing about cukes is they don't like to have their roots disturbed. So if I do grow them, I grow them in a 2-inch pot. It's 2 inches across and about 3 inches high, and 2 by 3. So it's a little bit bigger cell because I don't want to have to pot them up as they grow bigger. And I also very carefully sneak them into the ground. And when I put the soil around them, I'm gentle and I just water it in. I don't do that push that some people do because I don't want the cukes to realize they've been transplanted. And they're very successful, actually. So do what you want. These guys, they start great in cells. Brassicas, that's anything related to a cabbage. So kale and broccoli and stuff. But they'll often grow 3 weeks. And a lot of people say, I just can't keep them growing. They just die. That's because you've got them in your house. Sometimes that's why. Sometimes it's because they need fertilizer. They need liquid fertilizer. But they like it to be 60 to 65 during the day and then lower temps overnight. And so that can be a challenge. My house doesn't go down to 50 at night. So some people do it in the garage or something like that. And you can, if you need to, seed them outside in cells if you have a problem with slugs or you don't have the space or whatever, you want to overlap them. Kelly says, I don't recommend seed starting mix with lots of nutrients. Right, yeah, the seed starting mixes very often don't have very many nutrients in it. And she says, then I fertilize with quarter strength after you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cool. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, here's a tiny bit about lights. Here's why you can harvest earlier, grow your own tomatoes. You can, you know what you can do with lights. So you may not be using lights this year, but you might be. And maybe you will be next year and you'll be better prepared for it and you'll be a better grower. So not in knowing about lights will make you a better grower because you'll have the option. So let's take a look. You might want to grow those. Those are not in the nursery. Those are Bill Bean tomatoes. They do really well here. And they happen to be a huge tomato, but they ripen. That was July. The earliest I got was July 31st on that tomato. So, but you'd have to start your own under lights. You can use fluorescent lights. You can use very expensive LEDs with tons of tiny, tiny LEDs all over the surface of this light that shines. And then you hang it over your plants. And they can be like 2 feet wide by 6 feet long. And you can spend hundreds of dollars on those. Now, in a minute, John is going to tell us about his LEDs that he got, which are basically look like these tubes. But first, I'm going to tell you about fluorescent lights in case you want to go this way. Why would you use fluorescent lights? Well, they're free off of Craigslist. Sometimes you can get them for very much money at all. They already exist. you might have shop lights that are hanging out there that you haven't used in years. So you can use shop lights, and you can use the tubes that are already in them. I say that because I've done it for years. Carol Deppy, who is a plant breeder for the Northwest, said she starts all of her starts under shop lights with the original tubes that she got from a garage sale. And University of Oklahoma says this too. Your mileage may vary, but I have quite a bit of evidence about that you don't have to buy a more expensive grow tube. So if you want to go with fluorescent lights because you have them, you can find them, you don't want to manufacture something new, you can do it. There are a couple of considerations. One is that you need 2 tubes or more in each reflector. So the reflector is the shade, the white part, and this has 2 tubes, and this has 2 tubes. This one's empty. But sometimes you'll find a really wide reflector with 1 little tube in the middle. They are fooling you. That is not good for a plant light, because with these tubes, you can only put the plants where there are tubes right above them. So if you use these 2 lights, you'd put them right next to each other and hang them somewhere, and they would be almost touching. And then you would put plants only directly underneath them. You can't put a start out here because it looks bright out here to you, but it doesn't look bright out here to the plants. So you want to have leaves right above them. And fluorescent lights are not super strong. So it's true that a $400 plant light would be stronger, but what you do to compensate to use the plant light that you got for free, or it's in your garage right now, is you keep the plants like 1/2 inch above the lights or as close as possible to the leaves. These are actually too far away. So I should have put something underneath them. And we leave them on for a long time. So 12 to 16 hours typically with these. Even John, I think with your LEDs, I think you would have to do that. So some people put the light on a pulley so it goes up and down, so they can put it right above the plants. But I often have a 1 foot tall tomato plant and a 1/2 inch tall lettuce. And I don't have a whole lot of lights. So I don't have like a tall plants area and a short plants area. What I do is, this is literally a bookcase, and it's literally in my living room. I put a cover over it so you can't see the light as much, but this is hanging on top hooks and a little bit of chain from a shelf above. And then this is not actually the shelf below. This is an offcut of wood, and it's on the shelf to hold the plants up. And then as these grow, I'm going to pull out some of the supports from underneath. I am using a couple of books that I'm not very fond of, and this is like a takeout container and things like that. You could be very organized and all, but I'm just like, whatever works is fine for me. So you can definitely lift the plants up if you don't have like separate lights where you want to have some of them high and some of them low. Often I don't have enough plants, like I have a few of these and a few of these, so it doesn't justify like raising or lowering a whole lamp as well. Do keep your fluorescent tubes out of the reach of children and pets or anyone who could smack them, because they have some mercury in them. And so I may not advocate that you buy new fluorescent tubes because of the pollution issues, but if they're already around and it's a reuse issue, then I think they're very useful. But the 2 keys are leave them on for a long time and keep the plants really close to them. Even though it looks like, oh, these are really close and these are close enough, if you double the distance from the lights, like you go from a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, the amount of light they're receiving goes 1/4 as much. So it's a really big difference. John, will you tell us about John has lights that look like fluorescent tubes, but they're actual LEDs and they're working for your plants, right, John? You're muted, I think.
Yeah, they are. They're working very well. This is the second year that we've done it. Hang on just a second. I'm going to grab the other computer around so you guys
Maybe
can
he's going
see.
to.
Trying to see what I'm looking at here through the other. There it is. Can you, oh, hang on a second. Yeah. I can't see my camera right now, so I can just see.
You know what? It's not picking it. It's not picking it up.
It's not picking it up.
No,
So this should be. Hang on a second.
we're only seeing your background, I think.
Yeah, I don't want. So that's a different computer. You got to go to.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought I would show up. I thought I was on that setting. Never mind.
Is it showing up now?
Do you all see it? Yeah, I see it. So you have a set of wire shelves that you bought, right?
Right.
And you do have enough growing that you can justify like one light for the tall plants and one light for the small ones.
We have two different racks now. We bought one last year and one this year. We got trays. We use chains with carabiner to lower the lights up and down, lower, raise them. It's a pretty simple system for us. There's one heating pad for each unit. We found we were going to buy a couple of heating pads, but we realized we just need the one for each of the 4 shelves on each rack.
Mm-hmm.
And we can share it. That works quite well. Like I said, everything is in trays, like Lara was talking about. I found some trays at Home Depot that I bought. They were inexpensive, and they hold quite a few of those small, pint containers that you can use for the plants. Mm-hmm. And we're experimenting.
Having a good time. That's great. That's what a lot of this is about, because we're growing mainly skill, right?
Yeah.
We're all going to have things die or, get leggy or whatever. But what we're trying to do, I think, is grow a gardener. So I appreciate that. So
what sort of fertilizer do you need for that?
If you do get LEDs, you've got John's option where they look like tubes. They look like fluorescent tubes, but they're LEDs. That's one of those on the right-hand side. Ideally, the wisdom is that you should have a certain amount of brightness and a certain number of Kelvin, which is sort of it's how warm the light appears. It tells you what the wavelength is of the light that's coming out. So get a pencil, because I don't have this one written down, although I could put it in the resource page if you want. So typically they say 1,500 to 2,000 lumens, LUMENS. Yes, I can put this in here. 1,500. Now I've seen people do successful without this, but if you want to try to look around for it. And oops, I'm getting 2 posts, and 4,500 to 6,000 Kelvin. It's what it's called, K. So that's the appearance. That's not an actual temperature, or you'd be going up in flames. But what I would look for if you are investing in specifically a plant light, and you're putting a couple of $100 to $500 into it, as John said earlier, you can pay whatever you want. You can get $1,000 plant light. If you do, and you're looking for one that you want to buy, I would look at the reviews and see if they mention veg starts, because if all they say, as they frequently do, is these lights are awesome, my marijuana plants have never budded so much before in my life, this may not be a light for plant starts, right? So different kind of lights work for different things.
Yeah, be careful. This is
Uh,
John. Be careful when
Yeah,
you
John.
look at LED lamps, and I almost got caught by this. When they say full
Mhm.
spectrum, I don't know whatever happened to truth in advertising, but full spectrum does not mean full spectrum to everyone. So some full
Mm.
spectrums are just in the red range, but you
Oh
need to
my
look at
gosh.
the little chart that you had there, which showed kind of the full blue to red spectrum there. You need to look for that
Yeah.
information that right there. You need to look for that because I've seen them advertised as full spectrum and they're just, I don't know if they're
It's
marijuana.
just like right here.
Yeah,
Oh
they're just
no.
in the red
That,
spectrum and they give you
but
really,
red,
really leggy plants if you go that route.
I think red causes things to bloom, right? I
Which,
think that's full spectrum if you are trying to grow marijuana, right?
okay,
That's
I don't
might be
know.
what you're looking for. But sometimes you'll see online, this is a graph that came with it was on the website for a particular kind of plant light. So you want red and you want blue. That's
Yeah,
what the babies
I
like.
have LEDs and I have a selection switch on the end of each thing to where I can pick
Mhm.
everything.
Oh,
And I think the lower end and the top end, or maybe three or whatever. So I have about 3 or 4 different options, and I tend to
cool.
leave it on everything. But
Oh.
but but if I want to encourage or in one stage of the growth or whatever, I can go that route. But yeah, be careful if you, particularly the stuff that comes out on Amazon or whatever, you could be throwing money
Yeah,
down the drain there if you end up with something that doesn't give you the selection you need.
right. Do you want to put any info about your lights into the chat? Or
I would have to
later,
research
like
them.
in your
I,
spare time? Okay.
yeah, I
I
could. I don't know.
posted a link that is from the Vegetable Academy. This guy in Canada was a science
Mhm.
teacher, and then he decided to become a
Oh,
full-time grower. So this little white paper
uh-huh.
that he wrote is a scientific study of all the grow light and the different kinds by
Oh my
every
gosh.
location. It's really, really good.
The thing that I've been looking for so long. You can't really trust science teachers though, can you, John? John, I was a science teacher. Okay, I'm taking that.
Gotta
I'm
watch them every
stealing it.
minute.
And that paper actually made me decide on which LEDs to get. And I chose
Oh, that is so great.
the Sun Blaster version, or
Master writing it
yeah,
down.
Sun Blaster, and that's it's a Canadian company. And so I ordered them from Victoria and they came right over
Uh-huh.
here really quick, and it was less money
Nice.
too.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that is so cool and so neat that you have them. It's great to hear personal recommendations and get more detail about the LEDs because it's kind of the Wild West on LEDs right now. Wouldn't you say it's sort of early in their technology? I know they've been around for a while, but there are all these different kinds and there's some regulations that people aren't following and all kinds of stuff. So great to
Oh,
have that. Thank you.
absolutely. And they're very much suited towards the marijuana growers because that's where their
Mm.
market is. But this one was
Mhm.
tested for vegetables.
Nice. Thank you so much. Let's see what else we got. No, you do not need a $1,500 rack. I'm showing you this one because there are a lot of PVC, how to make a PVC rack. PVC generates toxins when it's produced and particulates when it decomposes, which it does in sunlight. So I would say if you already have PVC or somebody's throwing some away or something, and you can make a rack out of it, or otherwise it's your business if you do make a PVC rack. I would challenge this one. 2 tubes would be nice in each of these lamps, and the lamps should be close together because you don't want any gap, and the plants should be right up under those lamps. But the nice thing about these is that you can put them together like Tinker Toys and you can pull them apart because you don't glue it. It's just loosely placed together and it holds together and then you can store it flat. But this wooden one is also really easy to make. And you could like put wing nuts here so that you could take it apart and fold it down in the off season. My lights don't really have an off season, so I think I like that. You can also do this should only take me 10 minutes to get back. You can also do the bookcase thing or wire shelves that you find on Craigslist or go out and spring for. The reason I mentioned cost so much is I feel like it's really, it's not fair to say, you too can be a great grower, just buy this, buy this, buy this. And then $10,000 later, I'm talking like I'm great at growing stuff. And it's really an issue of being able to buy things. So I'm trying to walk the talk and not spend and suggest ways for you to do it without spending so much money, because it can actually get kind of expensive. You might get this. Do not despair. You have been baptized into the world of home growers. Sometimes the baby plant comes up and it makes you all excited, and then the next day it's lying down dead because it's rotted right there. It's a fungal infection from the soil surface. So if it does happen, go throw every bit of soil and plants out underneath a tree outside because they can tolerate it. It's not a problem. And soak your cells. You know, I like to think that vinegar works, but there's been evidence that it doesn't really work. So you might want to use some little tiny bit of bleach and then rinse the heck out of it. Use sterile seed starting mix. Don't leave a humidity cover on it more than just until the seeds germinate, and pull that humidity cover off, even if you, or don't use one at all. And also, now I can't see my screen. You might want to use a little fan, like a personal fan that somebody is no longer using, tiny fan that blows across your plants. It also makes your plants sturdier because they feel the stress of being blown on, and it makes them grow a little tougher. And it can prevent damping off. It also can help prevent fungus gnats. You get little flies that look like fruit flies. That can happen. That can be helpful. Let's see what else we have to say here. Yeah, well, this is what I told you before. I thought I hadn't had that written down. It may say daylight, but as John says, you want to make sure that if you can, you want to look at the spectrum and make sure it's really broad spectrum. So daylight is typically in this range. I don't think mine are. I'll tell you this. I'm pretty sure my tubes are not this. And I have had 2 different sets of lights and it's all worked. So I want to say this is what they say, but also if you just have some, I'd give it a go. Just give it a try. You might need to pot up. So if your teeny tiny plants are filling their space with roots, and this one is kind of root bound, it really needs to be potted up. Maybe last week it should have been potted. You may have to pot up, especially if you have tomatoes that are already filling their space in the pot with roots, but it's only April and it's too cold to put them out. You're going to pot them up. If you grow your own tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, you start small and then you pot them up at least, I do it at least twice. And the reason we don't start them in a big pot is that pot will be really soggy and harbor potentially bacterial rots that will rot the roots, because the roots are very tiny in there. We want the roots to be able to occupy that space fairly quickly and pull the moisture out of it. So that's why we start tiny and pot up. And how do we know when we can pot something up? Well, you can when it has when it starts to get true leaves, typically 2 to 4 true leaves, it will either need to be potted up or planted out, depending on whether or not it's warm enough. So here's the difference between a true leaf and a not true leaf. These are called cotyledons. They were originally hidden in this form inside of the seed, and they just expanded out. So this is a broccoli. That's what a broccoli leaf looks like. These do not look like broccoli leaves. So cotyledons usually look odd, and the true leaves look more like the parent. This is lettuce true leaf, lettuce cotyledon. This is probably dill cotyledon. So we want 4 of these. So we'd like this thing to have 2 to 4 of these guys, real ones, probably bigger than that. And then we'll gently turn it upside down in our hand, and we'll see if its pot is full of roots and it needs to be potted out. So this one doesn't need it. It has lots of room to grow. In fact, if you turn to this one over, all the soil would fall off. And if it was a picky plant, it might get mad at you that its roots had been disturbed. This one's a little too root bound, although many successful plants have overcome this. Some plants can't, like cucumbers don't like it. This one is just about Goldilocks right there. Maybe it could, have a couple more roots, but or a couple fewer, but that's just about right for either potting up or putting out in the garden. So we've got these things, and they've grown up and they are successful, and we need to break it to our little lodgers that they're going to have to leave. They're going to have to move out onto their own. So we're going to look for 3 to 4 true leaves. We're going to reduce the water slightly. We're not trying to parch them. We're just trying we're trying to let them know there's going to be some water variation once they're out in the real world. So just a tiny bit. And we're not going to fertilize them. And we're going to put them outside for an hour or 2. If it's blisteringly hot and they've been inside your house, you might want to put like window screens propped up near them very firmly. You don't want the window screens falling and hurting them, but you might want to give them a little bit of gentle shading the first day or maybe 2 days. And then every day you leave them out for like an hour or 2 longer. I would keep them up, because you'd be heartbroken if you put all this energy in and then something came along and ate them, right? So keep them off of the ground. And I might even put some rime, which is thin agricultural fabric, or some netting or some wool from the thrift store that I found, or something like that, over them to keep a bird from coming and eating the leaves. I'm going to skip slugs. I would like to, I'm going to skip that also. Let me see if we're done or not. Oh, these are some other things that you can use for cloches. All of these should be vented, but they're not. So the ends of this, you can see it's sweaty in there, right? Should lift the ends on these, which I did, and prop these up, but not before I took a photo. So these are old refrigerator drawers. The owner of Bayhay had broken this and was walking out to the trash with it, and I took it. That's an old 70s umbrella that had broken. And this is a little tunnel. So I want to show you a little bit about that. Let's see. So I'm going to tell you about, after you get these babies outside, you will sometimes see in a planting calendar that says, you can transplant your starts out if you have a cloche or a tunnel to put over them at this time of year. I don't know, maybe April. And you might want to do that. You might want to make a little tunnel or a cover for them. So you can use the things that I showed in the previous slide, or you can make something, and I'll show you briefly how to make a thing. And these are the reasons why. You can protect those seedlings early, whether they're transplants or direct seeded. You can make lots and lots and lots of peppers happen and go all the way to red if they have the warmth that they need, and they had the warmth in May when you put them out, and also in September on those edge seasons for peppers. It helps them grow to maturity faster so that they can set fruit, so that they can produce peppers for you, and you can help them ripen up at the end of the season as well. Yeah, it can help you out. So let's see what else I have in here. Oh, and they also protect food over winter. Every lump in this photo is food. And some of it, most of it, half of it, I'm going to say, is under some kind of protection. And some of it's not at all. So we eat in a typical year, almost exclusively all of our veg from the garden and don't buy veg. So you can make tunnels. This is a very common way to make a tunnel. This is flexible black piping. Some people use metal conduit. This is a bar, a metal bar called rebar, and they've driven the rebar and shoved the pipe over it, and then they wrap plastic, and then they pin the plastic at the ends. That is a way to do it, and it's very common. There are many videos, thousands of videos online that you can see. I'm going to show you a different way because I prefer the mobility of something that's not pinned to the ground and that I can just pick up one day and toss it off to the side with one hand. I really like that. So I don't use these. I use remesh instead. So see, this is 6-inch square mesh. It's not fencing. Fencing, for my taste, is too squishy. And it's not paddle panel. Paddle panel, super heavy, super hard, and super expensive. But this is concrete reinforcing wire mesh, and it's called, as a slang term, remesh. You bend it gently into its form, but later you can unbend it if you need a flat trellis or if you need it to bend in the other direction. One thing to know about it is this is about 8 feet across here. So you can't just get a 2-foot piece and figure you can bend it into a tunnel. To make a tunnel that's even 4 feet across and low takes about 7.5 or 8 feet of mesh. So you want to get a big piece of it. And let's see if we can see me do this. So this is me doing one. It is 8 feet in this dimension. I'm partly hiding it, but that's 8 feet. And it's 4 feet this way. So it's only 4 feet long. If I want an 8-foot tunnel, I can either get a longer one or I could wire 2 of these tunnels together. This is either plastic from reuse, like a mattress store or something like that, or UV resistant plastic that I've purchased. The reason I advocate for the UV resistant is it will last you several seasons in the sun. Because if you don't get UV resistant plastic and you just go to the hardware store and get some plastic in a bag, a sheet, it will particulate pretty quickly. John, you said 1 year you get, right? Yeah. So I have used this tunnel for 3 or 4 years and it doesn't really show any signs of wear yet. They guarantee or whatever they say, it'll last for 4 years. So I put enough plastic to go all the way from the bottom of one side down to the bottom of the other side. And that leaves me flaps on the side so you can see me tucking it in. And then I tie some paracord or other non-stretchable rope on the bottom, the other side, right? And run it over the top. And then this is a little bungee cord to keep it really tight, and it's hooked under the bottom. And then if it's windy and I want to keep it from blowing away, you know those rocks that you found in the ground when you were trying to dig your garden that everybody has thrown underneath their deck or whatever? I take some of those and I put them, one here maybe, on each side. And then it does hold it down. If you have super windy conditions, you might need more rocks or bigger rocks, or you can, I have been known to tie it down from here down to like a mason block. If that year we had 60-mile-an-hour winds, I did that. But for the most part, these do stay in place for me. You can experiment with that. So this is one way, another way to do it. One way to do it. If you'd like to, on the resource page are some sources for this, including the plastic. And if you just want one sheet of plastic, you can email me and we'll talk. I can cost share with you because I can get a roll of it and then I can just share like 15 feet of plastic with you if you want to try one of these. What else do we have? Oh, and you can put deer netting. I wouldn't put bird netting. Bird netting's annoying and blows around in the wind. But deer netting on these and keep the rabbits off your food if you like, or the squirrels out of your strawberries. Let's see. Oh, and it can get sweaty in there, so you want to make sure that on a sunny day or anytime you see a lot of moisture in there, you can either take it off and just throw it upside down until it dries out, or you can vent both ends a little bit and open up those, and don't leave your tomatoes in there when it's soaking wet. And we're close to the end. So they should cost you, a 3.5 by 7 sheet should cost you about $16. If someone tells you it's $50 to $70, tell them that's cattle panel, that's not what I want. I have had 2 instances where I specifically said remesh, and they brought me cattle panel. And I said, I know you've got remesh. What are you doing with the cattle panel? And they sputtered, oh, I assumed you wanted it for your garden. I don't know why they think that. And they did it to a friend of mine too. So there is sometimes a misunderstanding about what you want. So you want to make sure that you know that you want remesh. These guys have really big pieces, hard to get home, right? But if you do the geometry ahead of time and you know what you want, you can email me and I will lend you my bolt cutters, and you can go to the parking lot of Addison and Pacific Supply in Bremerton and cut it to the correct size that will be good for your garden and also fits on top of your car, and then bring it home if you'd like. What else do we have? We're done, except to tell you that I have a challenge for you in this picture. This is about next month. Next month, we're going to talk about predatory and parasitoid insects. Why would we talk about them now? Because if you would like to attract those to your garden, and you should totally do this, they're super cool and they're powerful. And you know what? They are adaptive, and we need adaptive solutions with climate change. We need things that can adapt as the climate changes. So they are very adaptive and helpful for us, and we are severely underusing them. And next month, I'm going to tell you how to invite them in. That has to do with partly pruning less and cleaning less in your garden. So if you are putting off pruning old dead stuff or cleaning up leaf litter, I invite you to wait until next month if you can put that stuff off. I'm not talking about not pruning, living vines and things like grapes and fruit trees. But if you have dead pieces of stuff sticking up and litter and stuff like that, you might want to wait until next month to learn about it. I have a challenge for you. Can you tell me which of those is beneficial and which is a bad guy? Tick, 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 tick. Of course, it's a trick question. Even that looks like a housefly, that's not a housefly. So every one of these eats pest insects in your garden. So I am so grateful for the participation tonight. That was really cool. And I hope to see you next month for this. I'm looking right now to see if I missed anything in the chat. I think we've seen it. Yes. Well, thank you so much to everyone. And thank you very much, John, for hosting us. And we made it by 8:04.